school on Saturdays, so I don't know how many years.
Well, you were still teaching the same time you were going to school.
I was doing that. And but we were getting credits at that time, and they kept adding things that for a teacher. And until I had so many credits that I had finished, when I finished down there, I had enough for a master's degree. But I couldn't at that time. OU wasn't accepting credits from East Central, only just so many. Those extras, you could just get so many credits for so many, and those extras I didn't get any credit for. I remember that I had 8 hours of agriculture, and qualified. Well, this is an agricultural area and state, and so teachers had to take agriculture. I knew all about chickens and cows and how to raise them and how to plant strawberries and all of those things that was agriculture, but I never did use it in my teaching. But now let's see, what did I mean to tell when I started in on this?
Well, you were just telling us about.
I was telling about my
how you got to
teaching experiences and so forth. And so that's how it came about. And then, as I said, I got my degree from Ada in 1937. And then I went over to university, and then it was like it is now.
That sort of thing. Off the subject, but do you have any idea how much tuition was at that time at East Central? How much an hour or something?
I don't have the least idea, but it wasn't anything like it is now. And I know it's been, when I went over to university, it was $8 an hour when I first went over there. And what is it now? It's a lot more. I don't know what it is.
Probably 20 or something. I don't know.
But when I first went over there, I paid $8 an hour. But of course it's been raised now, everything's so much higher at that time. And I lived in the girls' dormitory 2 summers over there at Norman. And one summer I lived out, 2 summers I lived out of this.
How long have you taught there?
Well, as I said, I taught that one little school down the south of Wewoka, near Holdenville, really, before I finished high school. Then I came back and finished high school, and in the first year out of high school, I taught at a school called Thrace. I think it was about 7 miles south of Seminole. I think it consolidated the district. There is no district by that name anymore anyway, and I don't know what happened to that. And then the following year I went out to Mississippi at the mission, and I was out.
Can you go into detail about Mississippi School? Just briefly. We enjoyed that.
Well, I enjoyed it too. I went out there in the fall of 19 and 20, I guess. The year 1919, 1920, I guess. It was, the war was going on, that didn't affect the children. But when I first went out there, I had no experience with Indian children, and I didn't think I could do it at all. And I was frightened, but the superintendent said, well, just come out and stay until we can get someone. Well, after I got out there and started and found out that it wasn't the big boogeyman that I thought it would be, well, they prevailed on me to stay, and I really enjoyed it and liked it. And I didn't know a word of Seminole language at that time, I don't suppose, but it didn't take me too long to learn a lot. And I always had some little child in school who could speak some English, a little bit, words like I could. And so I went into the schoolroom, and I just had to improvise. I learned as quickly as I could the Seminole name for every object in the schoolroom, and all the foods and clothing and all that sort of thing, and come and go, and while I couldn't speak the language, I came to understand a lot of it. Then I used pictures and charts and to teach the little fellas, the word and the picture, and if I could say it in his own language, and then say it in English. I just learned to do it that way. And however, we weren't supposed to let the children use their own language there, looking back on it. Well, there was a reason, because they were supposed to learn English, and we were supposed to teach them English, and we were supposed to encourage them to speak English, and to insist on their speaking English, so they would learn it. Because when they went to the larger schools, now Shalaka, for instance, well, they had children there from all over the states, and there's so many different tongues that the English was the common tongue, and they were supposed to learn English first, I guess, and above other things. And so I worked from year to year, and I learned as they learned. And we didn't expect the first grade children, the children who entered for their first year, to be promoted to second grade because of the language barrier. We expected them to take 2 years to get the language foundation there they needed, enough to go ahead. Of course, there might be some who could and who did, but it wasn't expected of them. And after that, though, they progressed rather rapidly. And it was an interesting life because it was a boarding school, and we lived right with them all the time, with the children, and they had dormitories. The girls on one side of the building on the third floor and the boys on the other. And I think, as I told you before, they were separated, and their sleeping quarters were separated. And the hall had a wire, kind of like chicken wire, all the way across, and a door. And the door, the matron locked it every night.
Didn't want them to get in or out.
They don't get in or out unless there's someone there to open the door. That is the girls. The boys weren't locked in, but the girls were. I don't understand that yet, do you? That was before the days of women's lib. I didn't approve of it then. I don't approve of it now. And I lived with the girls' matron for a long, long time. And our room was right at the foot of the stairs where the stairway led up to the dormitory. And the dormitory was just a long room with beds for the children. And
Wasn't individual?
no individuals. It's just rows of beds, and they all had the same. And but however, we were on duty all the time, day and night, because any time there might be a knock on your door, and they came to think of me just like they did of the girls' matron, which is next to mother, And then they had another room they called a sewing room, but in that room there were lockers for the children. You might say lockers, only they didn't have doors on them. They were just more like shelves on the wall, boxes, but each child had a place for his clothes, and his name was sewed into every garment that he had, so they were taken care of like that. And the children went to school half a day at a time. If they would be in the school this morning, well, they'd be out this afternoon. And how did it go? And it didn't go like that. It went that they'd be in school in the afternoon and in school the next morning and out the next afternoon. And then those details were worked up. I think they changed every month. And the children, they were assigned different places to work. The children and the employees did the work for all of it. Of course, there was all the cooking, the washing dishes, and the washing and the ironing, and all the work that goes on in housekeeping. And the girls were assigned to the girls' matron and to the dining room matron, and they had jobs to do, you know. And of course they went to school part-time, but then they had jobs to do. And the boys were assigned to the other work, the cleaning work and the farm work. They had the dairy and the farm and the dairy, and they had a shop, and they did work out like that. We did have hot water, and our bathrooms. I think, as I said before, I had never had a bath in a bathtub till I went out there, because Seminole had no hot water, no heat except wood fire, you know. That's for the days of gas. And we all had our bathtubs were our wash tubs. We had our baths, but we had to carry the water in and pour it in the tub and take a bath, then carry it out. Well, they did have water and heat. They had their own heating plant. It was steam heated. And we had what did we call him? A man who took care of that. That was his job, is to take care of the heating plant, the heating system. We called him our engineer, that's what we call him. And he took care of it. Of course, it was boiler heated. And he had...
the students got to help him them day,
Oh, I'm sure they didn't do very... well, the first year, yes. The first years I was there, we had larger boys. They were 14 and 15. Maybe some of them as old as 16, because it seemed to be at that time that the Indian children didn't stay in school very well, and the parents were reluctant, I guess, to take them off and leave them in a boarding school, and they didn't start them very young. So the first few years, 2-3 years I was there, I had adult students. That is, they weren't adult in age, but 14, 15 years old, just their first times in school. But that didn't last long. As the years went on there, the children became younger and younger. That is, they brought them to school earlier and earlier. That's what happened. And these older ones dropped out. Most of them, I think, got married, you know, long about they married early. And then the last years that I was there, I didn't have any children, I don't suppose, in the first grade over 8 years old anyway. And by that time they had allowed us to cut their hair, you know, Buster Brown style. That was stylish at that time. Cut all of their hair. And on special days, they wore their own clothes every day in the week, but they had uniforms. Girls and boys had uniforms that they wore on special occasions, and to church every Sunday. They Sunday school. Every Sunday they dressed up.
Have a minister to come out to school?
A minister. We had a regular minister once a month, and then we had drop-in ministers. And then on other days it was up to the teachers and the faculty, teachers especially, but some other members helped too, providing the devotional or entertainment on Sunday nights. But we had Sunday school every Sunday, whether or not we had a minister. We had our own Sunday school.
Did you enjoy the people that came out to tour the school?
I think you remember that. Oh, yes, I did. First, I enjoyed touring it myself before I ever went out there to teach, because that was one big treat. Because that was the most pretentious building in the whole area. That was a show place in this part of the country, you know. It had 4 floors, and it was a pretty building. It had long halls and long stairways, and I enjoyed it thoroughly going up there. And on Sunday, we went out there to ball games too. And I'd made several trips out there, you know, not ever thinking that I would ever be out there to live or teach. But it was something special to get to go out there. But as I think I had said before, that for the employees, after a time, it wasn't a special treat to get to entertain the people who came out, because, as you said, we were guides, and the time you walked all over that building took them from the basement floor, which it was just half underground and half up, but it was high enough that you could walk under the porches on the outside, you know, not touch it. So the time you took someone on a tour all over the building, well, one had exercise. So I don't remember of ever hiding from a group who was coming out there, but I know some who did. Just slip away, they see. Slip away to avoid that tour.
Overall, did you enjoy your teaching years out there?
Oh, I loved teaching out there. I loved it very much, but I don't know why. Well, I know one reason why I wanted to leave too, I guess, was the fact that I was the only single person left out there. And I think, as I said, Gwen, on that tour when we were out to mission, I don't know what it was, unless I thought I would never get married if I lived out there, if I stayed. And the social life was very limited.
Very dull, huh?
It was limited anyway. And I didn't get to come into Seminole, into town too often. We had Monday off instead of Saturdays. And on Monday morning we cleaned. My job was to oversee cleaning the schoolroom. The children did most of the work, but I usually worked along with them. And we kept our floors polished. I mean, everything was shining and polished. And Monday was clean-up day, Monday morning. Monday afternoon was go-to-town day. And sometimes the children were taken, those who needed to or wanted to go. And different ones of the employees would go to town if they wished to on Monday afternoons. And in the early day, before we had any cars, we had something like a surrey to ride in, you know. And then they had wagons to haul supplies in. But eventually we had cars before I left out there. But it was a beautiful place, and I love being out there, love living out there. But I guess I finally came to the conclusion that it was just too confining and too lonesome in a way, I guess. I didn't have enough contact with people my age at that time. Oh, let's see. It was in the very late 20s.
Well, looks like we're running out of time. Mrs. Sullivan, let's see, what year did you get married? And you had your children, and then did you teach at Roosevelt Central, the first grade?
Well, I taught, after I left the mission, I went to Mountain View, and I was out there 12 years. And in between going out there, though, I married in 29, and that didn't last. I had my child, and then I went back to teaching.
You were my first grade teacher.
Well, that's right.
Really great
That's
teacher.
right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. You're kind to say that. You were a nice little student.
I'm sure.
All of these, yes, they were. All of these Johnsons. I had you and your cousins, your sister and your brother and your cousins. And they were all lovely children, sweet little ones.
Life when it first came to Oklahoma.
Now, before I even see it, I learned the cultural relations from my way. My father died in my way in 81, the year of the big flood. And when I was 12 years old, we landed in the cultural nation there with one of my uncles. And I've been in Oklahoma principally ever since. One year, the biggest part of the year, I was in California. worked in for the gas company, making tools for them, cutting in big tanks. Quite a while. And I worked in a blacksmith shop. I brought a fellow out there, Norman, and off of the farm. I worked there 3 years. The rest of the time I've been here, around about, and let's see now.
The run in '93, did you make?
Mine. Oh, wait a minute.
Take your time. We have plenty
I
of
went
time.
I quit the shop and went out in Beckham County and bought my uncle out there off of 106 acres. He was about to leave, and I was there. Let's see, I was there 9 years. And I stopped that off from land in Arkansas. And I stayed around for 2 years. And I bought a 80 down there on Poto. I bought a 90. And I was there 4 years. And that's the way I come in. I was about to die, and I just walked off and left it. Get to 29, I will see. I left another book.
What about the run in '93?
Hmm?
The land run in '93. Cherokee Strip.
Oh, yeah, I was when I was 22 years old. I left that part of it out. Yeah, I got a maybe run in there and jokes up. Run in there together. We got a place and dropped, and I went on, and I got a good place. Part bottom, about 40 acres at the bottom of the land. Next morning I stopped it for another $25 pony and give it to him. It didn't suit me. And in fact, I didn't have the money to improve it. And that's the reason I paid it down.
Where did you leave when you left that, swapped it for that pony? Where did you go to?
Hmm?
When you swapped that land for that pony, where did you go to then?
I come back from Norman.
What year was that? Was that 94?
Mm-hmm. I lived in Norman. 16th Way North is in that road. Not 16th of March, 16th September. 16th Way September is in that room. And I just come back there, went to work. Let's see. About I went to Texas to go to war. I come back on my wife and Norman. Went to Ontario for that time. That's it. Yeah,
voice you've just heard is Charles Albert Lewis, 102 years of age, living in a nursing home in Durant, Oklahoma.
This is an interview between T.W. Sumter and Denise Jackson in Laverne, Oklahoma, March the 1st, 1973. Mr. Sumter, will you give me your name and spell it for me?
Thomas, Thomas, Wesley, Westley, Sumter. Sumter.
And when were you born?
August 10th, 1881. My girl.
Now your father's and mother's name.
Father's name was William David Sumter, and mother's name Alcina Carey Sumter.
And where were they married? And,
At Danville, Illinois,
and when did they come to Oklahoma?
in 1901.
I believe you told me they came before you did. Is that right?
Yes.
He filed, did he?
Filed on the claim about 7 miles southeast.
And when did you come?
In June 1902.
And that would put you about how old?
20.
20. How did you travel when you came to Oklahoma?
By covered wagon.
And you came from
Fort Scott, Kansas.
Fort Scott, Kansas. Can you tell me any incidents that happened that is outstanding on your trip here to Oklahoma by covered wagon?
We were between 2 and 3 weeks making the trip. My sister, her husband, and I. We would travel approximately 40 miles a day. Camped, of course, each night, and had an overjet on the wagon. My sister and her husband slept in the overjet, and I had a bunk of a bedroll, and I slept out on the ground. Most probably laughable instance was when we took the Seminole River at what is known as the White Horse Crossing, west of Alva. We heard so many tales about it that we hesitated for quite a while before driving across. And first I took off my boots, rolled up my trousers, and waded across to be sure that we wouldn't cave in. So it was a quicksand too. But I waded across and was sure that everything was all right, and just reported without any incident.
Did you have any bad storms on the way?
None whatever.
Well, how lucky. And you cooked out, of course.
Always.
And what did you use for fuel?
Oh, usually carried a little few sticks of wood and stuff with us to pick up along the way. That's fine.
And when you got to Oklahoma, where did you come to? Woodbridge?
We came to supply.
Oh.
and supply on up to Father's place.
What, did you camp at Supply for a day or two to rest up? Or?
No, we stayed overnight there, and it rained dry onto the storm that night, and it was red soil where we camped, and we were pretty messy the next morning.
All right. Tell me something about your schooling. I believe you told me that you finished your schooling after you got there.
No, I graduated in May 1902 at the Fort Scott High School. And shortly after that, then within a few days, we started on our trip to Oklahoma.
And then after you got here, you told me something about teaching.
Well, after we got here, really, there was no way. It was at least very difficult to earn it all. So I went to Woodland, and the county superintendent, J.A. Dixon, was conducting a normal preparatory for teachers, a month's duration. I entered that and came out with a certificate to teach. And then I taught country schools for probably 4 or 5 terms.
And between terms, did you work for your father, or what did you?
No, I became of age shortly after here, and filed on a little tract of land about 12 miles south of the Warren, and in the summertime, planted a little crop, and each year I made a trip up to near Pratt, Kansas, and rode across the country on horseback, and stayed up there during the harvest. Sometimes working in a barge, and the last year or two I was up there, I stacked wheat.
And how much did you get paid for that?
$2 a day in the barge, and $3 a day for stacking.
Mm-hmm. And then you would come back and teach school. How were you paid teaching school?
Our salaries, $50 a month was top, but we were paid by federal funds. At that time, the government would pay for 3 months of school in any country district.
Mm-hmm. And your schools just lasted 3 months?
Well, no, they're usually longer, but the government paid.
Just paid for 3 months.
For 3 months.
Mm-hmm. All right, and long about this time you met the lady of your life, and I believe you told me you were married in what,
1906.
1906? All right.
Mm-hmm.
Would you give us her name?
Bessie Blake.
Mm-hmm. And did you move on your homestead at that time?
Not immediately after that. We moved to Greenwood, and I finished teaching a term of school. And the next summer, we moved out on homestead. Now, we were married Christmas Eve, 1906.
And about this time you became interested in politics, right?
Prior to that time, somewhat, I was interested in politics, and from local politics we went to the first congressional convention at the Geary, where he nominated a territorial congressman,
Okay.
Thomas B. Ferguson.
Tell me about your trip. How did you travel?
We, at that time, took a train at Woodard. Woodard had a candidate for Congress. We went by through Alva, and they also had a candidate for Congress. And they joined our train. We traveled and on down to Geary.
Were there a lot of fun going on between these two on the trip down to Gary? Were there a lot of...
Very sociable, everybody happy.
And everybody had...
No dissension.
Okay. Well, I just thought maybe the candidates were joshing each other.
Well, considerable jollification, of
Yes.
course. People were pretty open-minded in those times, and it's easy to get acquainted.
Yes. All right, and now who was elected at this delegation?
Thomas B. Ferguson was nominated.
Is this where you were telling me about how long the session runs?
Yes.
Tell me something about that.
Well, it was a closely fought contest. Wound up between Judge Newfeller, the candidate from Alva, and Ferguson. At 2 o'clock in the morning, there was a little politics going on, and the vote from one delegation was misannounced, if that's the proper usage of the word. And Ferguson received a sufficient vote out of this misquotation to receive the nominations, and before the protest could be lodged before the convention, Ferguson was on the platform making his acceptance speech, and that finalized the convention.
Now then, home politics. You became court clerk,
County clerk.
county clerk, of what county?
The Ellis County,
Ellis County.
a newly formed county, at state level,
In 1907.
1970.
Tell me about how you had to hold your offices at Grand and then move. Tell me about that.
Well, at statehood, Old Day County, was done away with. It consisted of about half of the area of the county south of the South Canadian River and about an equal amount north of the South Canadian River. And Grand was the official county seat of Old A County. It's being done away with at statehood. Ellis County absorbing that portion north of the river in which Grand was located. Grand actually became the county seat first of Ellis County because of the courthouse and all facilities there. And we moved to Grand at statehood and were there until August of 1908 when Arnett became the county seat.
Tell me about how Arnett got the county seat.
Well, they held what was known as the county seat election prior to August. I just remember, but I think probably in July. And Shattuck, Gage, and Arnett were each contenders for the county seat. The first election, Gage dropped out. And in the second election, Shattuck and Arnett were the contenders. Gage threw its support to Arnett and defeated Shattuck. And Arnett became the county seat.
And there never was a railroad at Arnett.
Never.
Tell me about your trip to Chicago and attending the National Republican Convention.
Well, as I recall, that was in 1912. We held a convention at Hobart to nominate delegates to the National Convention at Chicago. And a friend of mine by the name of Buck Oliver, and I held the proxies for the several delegates that were really elected from Ellis County, and went to the convention, and fortunately were with the powers that be at that time, and I received election as a delegate to the National Convention.
All right, and you got on the train again at Woodward, and
the party of four of us and trained at Shattuck for Chicago. There was no other party of delegates with us.
Mexico. And well, then when you arrived in Chicago and you went to the meetings, I believe you told me something about Theodore Roosevelt's daughter having something to do with your convention.
In convention in Chicago, at the same time was Teddy Roosevelt's Bull Moose convention. probably about a half a mile from our convention. And the thought all the way through was that the Bull Moose convention, through Teddy's great power, would overwhelm the regular Republican convention. And they attempted to do that by during the recess of the regular convention, Alice Roosevelt, Teddy's daughter, pretty well filled our convention seats with Bull Moose influence.
She really was fighting for her father.
Very strongly, and rightfully. But they tried storming in this manner the regular convention, but it was governed by the iron hand of Warren G. Harding. He was chairman of the Republican convention. And Alice and her delegation left without any great influence in the governing of the convention.
I've always heard people speak of her as being a very talented and lovely person. Do you agree with that?
Talented, yes. Not so.
Well, she was fighting for her father.
Very strongly. Very commendable. I admire her very much for it.
And who won in your convention?
We nominated Charles Evans Hughes.
Now, before, to go back in history a bit, Teddy Roosevelt served 2 terms as president.
Okay.
And then he chose not to run, and he went to Africa on a hunt. And who was president then while he was gone? Wasn't it?
Wilson, wasn't it?
No, William Howard Taft, wasn't it?
No, Taft, you have me puzzled there.
I thought Taft followed Theodore Roosevelt, T.R. Roosevelt. Okay.
I can't go on there. I don't recall.
Don't remember. Well, I looked up in the World Book Encyclopedia, and Taft followed the next 2 years after Roosevelt was president, and Taft was next. Now, I could be wrong too, but I think
No,
I'm
you
right.
could be right. I wouldn't argue that point from my memory just doesn't suit me.
Okay. Well, of course that doesn't matter, but according to the encyclopedia, William Howard Taft did follow Theodore Roosevelt.
Mm-hmm.
But now, to get back to this convention, your party being split, like it was with the Bull Moose, how did it come to be called Bull Moose?
I know this.
You don't remember. Well, anyway, the Republican Party split, right?
Right.
And that is what defeated them in the general election.
Right.
And Woodrow Wilson, the Democrat, won. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything else you remember about this convention that would be interesting for us?
Many, many things.
Yeah, let's hear some of them.
But many outstanding speakers. The biggest men of the time. But the person that I recall most vividly was Chauncey the Keel. He was conducted to the platform by either his two daughters or his granddaughters, and made a speech. I don't have to forget. Great impression. A wonderful person. The convention was very, very capably managed and conducted by Mr. Hardy, and he had wonderful assistance by Henry Cabot Lodge.
All right, and can you think of anything else now?
Not in
No.
particular.
All right. Now, in your personal life as a politician here at home, you told me something about Joel Beard.
That was back,
Yes, that we're
Early.
going back earlier to 1904.
yes, Joe Beer, at that time we had the township organization, which consisted of a complete set of officers, including assessors. Joe Beer was elected assessor of the township. As I recall, it was an area about 6 by 24 miles, called Ada Township. I had opposed Joe Beer. He was a Democrat, I was Republican. I had supported a fellow named Rook, George Rook. We were defeated, but sometime after Joe Beer took office, the deputy that he appointed to assess for him in a certain area of the township came through on his first day of assessing and stayed all night with me, and told me he didn't like the job and wasn't going to pursue it, and persuaded me to go ahead and finish the week of assessing for him, which I did, and rode him to Joe Beer's house on Saturday evening and turned in my book, and Beer was very much displeased at me taking over the job, but for some reason was satisfied with the work that I'd performed, and after our preliminaries, turning in the books and so forth, I started to leave. It was late at night, and Mr. Beer says, "You going to take the books with you?" I said, "I didn't suppose you wanted me to." And he said, "Yes, I do. I like your work, and I want you to go ahead and finish." And I did. We were good friends from there on.
And what about this rancher that
Oh,
you,
at the conclusion of the assessment, Mr. Beer says, Tom, I've got one more job. He said, he called this rancher by name and told me that he and this rancher didn't get along and that he didn't want to go assess him and wanted me to go to his job. And I didn't crave it because of this rancher's reputation. But I told him I'd go try. And I rode into the ranch in the afternoon, toward evening, and he asked me why Beer didn't come. I told him that he sent me, and I was his deputy, and I'd have to do the job. Well, he said,
all right, continue now.
well, I said, that makes a difficult situation. But I said, I'll be down here early in the morning. Hope you've changed your mind again, but if you haven't, I'll have to ride your lane. At that time, the law provided if you had to ride a man's lane, you would add an extra $1 as a penalty for each critter you assess. Well, I advised him that and told him I'd be down early the next morning. Next morning about sunup, I go down, got the door knocked, and was very cordially invited in. Family ate breakfast, invited me to join them. I did for a cup of coffee. We sat and visited, and he said, where are your books? I said, out on the settlement. He said, go get them. He suspended his assessment without any argument, and we became good friends from there on.
All right, now then, let's go back to when you went into the bank at Shattuck. I believe you were there for a while before you moved out on your homestead.
Well, no.
No.
I was the county clerk before I entered the bank at Shattuck.
Oh, yes, that's right. Mm-hmm. And any interesting experiences while you were county clerk?
Let's go back to the election as county clerk.
Okay.
That campaign was in August. I think we had the Republican County Convention at Shattuck in July. Then I was nominated for county clerk, together with as many other county officers that were nominated on the Republican ticket at this convention. Then we campaigned the county, and I think the election was probably in September. I might be a little wrong there as to the exact time of the election, but I campaigned the county on horseback, and we employed a man by the name of Hull, Major Hull, to set up a little drum corps, make the campaign with us in a covered wagon, really a chuck wagon, and we had the necessary supplies, bedrolls and all, that we put out that we could exist any part of the country we happened to be in. But we made this campaign very interesting. Of course, met many people and made many new friends. And at the election, most of our tickets was elected.
You had this drum corps. Was that a group with your
The three parties.
that played the instruments?
They played the instruments. We'd have these meetings at little country schoolhouses.
Yeah.
They were numerous at that time.
Yeah.
And about meeting time or a little prior to, the drum corps would start up the music and
Entertainment.
and we all had a good time, and it surprised you how these little schoolhouses would fill up for those occasions.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Each of us, in a way, made a little talk.
Yeah.
Tried to sell ourselves, and for some reason did.
Well, you know, the schoolhouses serve for a lot of different purposes, right?